Long days and pleasant nights to you. Today we're talking about a topic near and dear to my heart, Stephen King novels. They are not all built equally, so I will be tier listing them. These are just my opinions, they are not objectively true, except for when they are. If you would like to fight in the comments, feel free. Engagement is wonderful. If you agree with me, please like and subscribe. I hate saying it as much as you hate hearing it, but I'm a brand new baby to this and it does apparently help the numbers. I will be going in approximately publication order because I am both extremely neurotic and very bad at math. Starting with Carrie. How can you be alive this year and not know the plot of Carrie? Carrie is about a teen girl who's been bullied by her classmates her whole life, abused by her mom, and suffering religious abuse, and eventually she snaps and discovers she has psychic powers. It's the ultimate good for her novel. It's great, it's very final girl, you get a lot of female rage. Okay, this second one, you can't yell at me about. This is Salem's Lot, which I DNF'd very early on. 126 pages. This should be for me. I love the small town stories, I'm a sucker for vampires, but the breasting boobily was just off the charts and I couldn't care anymore, so I DNF'd this, putting it in the D tier for now. The plot wasn't bad and the characters weren't bad, I just could not handle the boob descriptions anymore. I'll come back to it eventually, especially for how it ties into the Dark Tower, but it's pretty low on my list. The Shining. Is this video just an excuse to show off all my first editions? Maybe. It feels good though. Look at this. It's in pretty great shape. It was already wrapped when I got it, and I got it at the Half Price Books on South Lamar in Austin. I refuse to gatekeep. Again, I'm not sure how you can be alive and not know the plot of The Shining, so very briefly, it's about a young family with their young son move to a hotel in Colorado to take care of it over the winter holiday when it's too snowed in for guests. Turns out there's something kind of wrong with the hotel, and it sparks the worst impulses in the father and awakens something in the son. That sounds really weird, but we all know what I'm talking about. It's great. It's the best allegory for addiction I've ever read, which is saying something for how often Stephen King uses magic as an allegory for addiction. The vibe is very different from the movie. If you haven't read it, there's a lot of nuance. We get flashbacks to Jack's life pre-hotel, so he's not just a jerk for no reason. And they cut some of my favorite scenes from the movie. I understand why they couldn't do the topiary animals, but it's the best scene, and I love it so much. It's not scary, but it's so good. And the boiler is extremely important to the plot, and it just isn't in the movie. I'll talk about Dr. Sleep when we get there, but I love what Mike Flanagan did to help incorporate the important beats of the book that were not in the original movie adaptation to help tie everything together. This is an S tier. If you read one Stephen King book, I think you should read The Shining. It's one of the few books where even if you know the plot from pop culture, it still keeps you interested because what the book is about isn't really the plot, and what the book is about and a lot of the important plot points aren't in the movie at all. Stephen King's first short story collection, Night Shift. I'm really biased because I don't love short story collections, especially when there's a Goosebumps style gotcha twist in the middle or at the end, and this is very guilty of that. The good is very good. This is classics. The Mangler, Lawnmower Man, which somehow was not spoiled for me, Children of the Corn, I Am the Doorway, incredible. But the rest of the short stories are middling to bad. I truly don't remember a lot of these because I just did not dedicate any brain space to it. I'm putting it in the B tier because of the classics, but it's like a B minus C plus. Okay, don't get mad at me about this one either, but I never finished The Stand. I've tried 8 million times. I've had this for so long that it is yellowing. I paid $8.99 for this. You can't get a paperback for $8.99 anymore. I'm sorry, I'm the oldest man in the world and I'm yelling at clouds over this, but books are so expensive right now. Anyway, I have DNF'd this 8,000 times. There's just too many characters and I don't care about any of them. I've heard it said that you're either a Dark Tower girly or the Stand girly, and I'm very firmly a Dark Tower girly. I have promised some real life friends that I will give this another try, but I can't guarantee that I'll ever actually finish it. Firestarter. Another, I'm really only reading it because I got this sick first edition. Look at how clean this is. Even in my grubby little hands. Firestarter. Again, way better than the movies. It's about a couple who volunteer for some MK Ultra style testing when they're in college for some extra cash. They wind up falling in love, getting married, and eventually having a child who is a fire starter. This is like Carrie Part 2 plus The Institute. I did enjoy reading it for the most part. I really loved the daddy-daughter bond. I thought that was really fun. I think Stephen King's really at his best when he's writing horror about a nuclear family. For that, I give this a B. The Gunslinger. The beginning of the whole Tower series. I love this book. Some people say that if you're not vibing with The Gunslinger, you can skip it and go to The Drawing of the Three. And to that I say, no, you can't. It's important thematically. It's very important with the ending of the 7th book. Just read it. Look how short it is. This is not long. The Gunslinger begins the story of Roland. He continues his year-long chase of his mortal enemy, the Man in Black, through the desert. I did read the revised edition. I have not read the original edition. It's so different than any other Stephen King. It's very Western. I don't love Westerns, but I love Star Wars, and what is Star Wars but a Western in space? I really want a jawbone tattoo now. The cosmic horror at the end is insane. S tier all the way. Another favorite, A Pet Cemetery. I only paid $20 for this. Maybe I should just do an old and rare book tour video and get that out of my system. I think that would be fun. Tell me if you think that would be fun. This is one of my favorite books ever, not just of Stephen King. It's only the second Stephen King book I ever read, one that I have reread the most out of all of them. It's so firmly lodged in pop culture like The Shining. I feel like you still get a lot out of the book because the pacing and the tension are unmatched. Pet Cemetery is a story of a couple with 2 young children who move into a new house right on a busy road. Their sweet elderly neighbor shows them the eponymous cemetery where kids bury their pets after they become roadkill. There's also another cemetery behind that pet cemetery that the indigenous people used to use. The ground there has gone sour, and sometimes what you bury there comes back. Something about watching characters make decisions that you know are bad, and they know are bad, but they're going to do it and neither of you can stop them, just hits differently. The only dread I have felt like this was watching Longlegs. The ending is also so much better than the movie. If nothing else, read this for the ending. I am taking a half point off because of the haunted Indian burial ground trope. I guess it was just a thing at the time. Poltergeist came out the same year and also has that. I feel like if it was written now, it could be written a lot more sensitively, let's say. But overall, I am giving this an S. I think this is another great entry point for Stephen King. If you've been thinking about reading him but weren't sure where, and you're okay with kids dying, read this one. It, the book that made me a constant reader. It is about an evil that descends upon a small town every 27 years. It hits while the main character's children, comes back when they're adults, and brings them back to town to end things once and for all. Is it a doorstop? Yes. Did I take 2 breaks in it to read entirely different novels? Yes. Is it still one of the best books I've ever read? Absolutely yes. The flow of time between childhood and adulthood, you get a feel for them in a way that you don't get in any other book. It also does a thing that Needful Things does, where you just get to know every single person in Derry. You know, their likes, their dislikes, their daily routines, and it's incredible. You get character development that I've never seen anywhere else. Also had a couple scenes that did make me very uncomfortable and very itchy, and that is saying something. I hate the ending, as I feel we all do. I feel like it's lazy and a little inexcusable, but then I read Grady Hendrix's essay on the ending of it, and I don't hate it as much as I used to. I understand where he's coming from. When you're writing horror, it is all about pushing boundaries. I mean, we still love Interview with a Vampire after all the weird shit that Anne Rice put in there, so I have slightly changed my opinion on it, but I think there are other ways to resolve the plot that would have worked better. Despite it all, I give it an A. It's not quite an S tier. It's like an A+, but I will call it an A. We finally get the sequel to The Gunslinger of The Drawing of the Three. This is, I think, his most cinematic book, in that it really feels like watching a science fiction movie. Roland wakes up on a beach to a lobstrosity chopping his little fingies and toes off. He crawls down the beach in a fevered haze and sees 3 doors on the beach. He opens each door, goes through, and basically time travels to 3 different parts of New York City. Through these doors, he finds his companions, his quartet, who will help him reach the Dark Tower. This is book 2 of 7, so I can't really give you more of a plot summary than that. Drawing of the Three, very firm A tier. Misery was my first Stephen King novel. I am very grateful that my parents never really policed what I read. I was reading Patricia Cornwell as a kid, which, I wouldn't recommend to most people, but I turned out like this. I really wanted to watch Misery as a kid. I have no idea why. It didn't even come out that year. My mom's rule was if I wanted to watch the scary movie, I had to read the scary book first. Little 9 or 10-year-old me read Misery, absolutely loved it. Mom and I watched the movie together, and she had to look in horror as tiny me was furious that they cut the ride-on lawnmower scene. How could you cut the ride-on lawnmower scene? I've always been like this. It's also a book about a writer. Stephen King loves writing books about writers. A romance novelist drives off the road in a storm and is saved by a Good Samaritan nurse, who it turns out isn't really that much of a Good Samaritan. When she realizes that he's the writer of her favorite book series, but that he's ending that series, she refuses to let him go until he writes a new ending with a new book that will continue going on. It's great. It's a great book. It's so good. It really feels like reading a one-room play. I would say the movie is about 98% as good as the book, even though they cut out the ride-on lawnmower scene. It is solidly going in the A tier. Oh, The Dark Half. You have such a great premise, such a wonderful setup, and are the first book of, my god, get me out of this POV, I can't do it anymore. This is about another writer whose books under his name don't sell well, but when he writes violent crime under a pseudonym, it sells like crazy. When his true identity is revealed, he and his wife have a photo shoot where he buries his pseudonym. But the pseudonym doesn't like being buried. If you know anything about Stephen King, he also wrote darker, grittier novels under a pseudonym of Richard Bachman. A bookseller realized that they were the same person, and the jig was up. I love the setup. We're just stuck in the head of the gritty, edgy, terrible person that is George Stark, the main character alter ego. And we spend a lot of time in his POV, and it's really, really insufferable. This is not the first time this will happen. I DNF'd this, I give it a D, but the movie is an A. The Wastelands, Book 3 of The Dark Tower. The quartet continue their journey to the tower, and Jake Chambers is going through some stuff. I love a lot of this book, and I kind of don't like the other half. King makes some really weird pop culture choices of what to include here that maybe made more sense at the time, but that kind of just pulled me out of it, so we're getting an A on this one. I finally read Needful Things last year, and I loved it, despite it being another doorstop. Now, we all know the plot of Needful Things. Mysterious proprietor Leland Gaunt moves into town and opens a shop. It's been beaten to death in pop culture, but I still loved this book. Like it, you get a deep dive into the entire town's psyche. The pranks are insane. The book is so much fun to read. There are still a couple scenes that creep up on you and you go, oh yeah, this is a horror novel. There's also some really fun religious commentary that reminded me of The Mist near the end that I was genuinely laughing while reading, whether I was supposed to or not. Needful Things, firmly an S tier. I could talk about this book all day. Rose Matter. I read this over the summer and it started an insane book slump, so I'm still a little salty about it. I did only read it because I have a copy of it and Kate Siegel said it was her favorite Stephen King book on the Kingcast, and it was fine. I finished it. The entire story is summed up in this one sentence. A woman leaves her abusive cop husband and he follows her. That's it. It's not bad. A lot of the reviews when it came out said that this was so over the top and no man would ever be that racist and misogynistic and hateful and bigoted. And I didn't have that problem because I live in 2024. I'm on Twitter. I survived a Trump presidency. Yes, men are absolutely like this. My problem was much like The Dark Half. We spend a lot of time in his POV. It's just insufferable. I would skim pages as fast as I could just to get through because like, yeah, I get it. I know what we're doing here. You're a terrible person. Please let me freeze so the plot can continue. I had no problem with the fantasy elements. I actually kind of enjoyed those. There's some weird ties to Dark Tower and other Stephen King parallel universe stuff, but I don't know why we made the choices that we did. I don't know if this was the beginning of Stephen King not getting edited to the level that I think he should have been. There's long stories like it and Needful Things where I feel like some of the content could have been edited. Rose Matter, you could read every other sentence and be fine. Also, more weird piss stuff. I don't know why people don't talk about that. Weird piss scene. The Green Mile. Another, how do you not know what this is about? Paul Edgecombe recounts the time that he spent working on death row. A man comes in who appears to be both innocent and have some special powers. Also a lot of pee talk again. I understand why Paul needed something that could be healed. Why did it have to be that UTI? Why is there so much peeing, Mr. King? So the good news is that these books are great and it is some of Stephen King's best writing. Bad news is, if you've seen the movie, all of the tension is gone. It's still good. It does have you empathizing with and liking characters who killed and raped people. That's very, very hard to do. But the tension is kind of gone when you know what happens at the end, when the whole mystery is already laid out for you. And since this was published in pieces, when you read it all back to back, the beginning of every new book is just a recap of what already happened, so I was doubly bored. I kind of gave up at the end of book 3, and then my Libby loan was up and I could get it again, and I just powered through it. I feel like overall it's an A tier. It's hard to take points away from the story being so good that you've already experienced what the plot is, but I don't quite think it's an S tier on its own. Wizard and Glass. Some say the best Dark Tower book, maybe even the best ever Stephen King book. When camping one night, Roland tells the quartet some stories from his past and his origin. It's amazing. You laugh, you cry, you think, how could Stephen King have written a romantasy and it be good? It's amazing. S++, beautiful. I could talk about it all day, but there are so many spoilers for all the other books. This next one deserves another chance for me. It's not its fault that it came to me in not great circumstances. It's 2022. I'm packing up my whole house to move to Oregon. Mr. Gremlin already moved out here, so it was just me and my deeply neurotic dog. So I packed up the dog to drive around for like literally 4 hours for an open house because he's kind of broken inside and needs special care. I thought, oh boy, why don't I get The Girl Who Loves Tom Gordon on an audiobook so I can listen to it while I drive around? I don't love survival horror, so this is a good way to knock out a short book. We made it to another peeing scene, and I got so mad about hearing a man describe a 9-year-old peeing in the woods that I just stopped it, which is a shame because I have the first edition and I recently found the pop-up book. I'll give it another chance. When I complain about this one, some people get really upset and they said it was amazing. It is very short, but I am coming off of such an awful Stephen King slump from reading so many short story collections back to back that it's probably going to take some time. I will give it another try someday, but until then, D tier. Wolves of the Kala. I can't do a plot summary. We're in too deep. The beginning of the meta that many people hated and I loved. That cameo made me laugh so hard. I love it. I love it so much. It's like the one thing I don't have a complaint about with this series is the weird meta. A tier. This is when Stephen King almost died in a van accident and went, oh shit, I can't not finish The Dark Tower. So we get 5, 6, and 7 right in a row. Song of Susanna, bit of a mixed bag. I love the meta. I don't love what King does to Susanna or the way he makes her act sometime. Still, overall, an S. And The Dark Tower, S+++. I love the meta moments. I see why people don't love the ending, but they're wrong. It's perfect. It's exactly what it should be. I loved every moment of this, even the silly, stupid stuff. Duma Key is another early read from me, and I can't separate my nostalgia from it from how good or bad it may actually have been, so grain of salt with this one. Our main man Edgar barely survives an accident at the construction site he works at. He loses a limb, gains brain damage and anger issues, and eventually it leads to a divorce. His therapist recommends he gets away to take some time by himself somewhere new, so he moves to eponymous Duma Key, and spooky shit starts happening. It could use some heavy edits, yes. I love the ideas that this brings in. I think it's just an interesting read. It feels very different from other Stephen King books. B tier. 11/22/63 is weird. I would not expect Stephen King to write this. I would not expect me to read it, but they both happened and I love this book. High school teacher Jake discovers that the diner down the street has a portal back in time in the back of it. And when the owner of the diner dies, he tasks Jake to finish his mission, go back in time and prevent the JFK assassination. Bonkers, right? Like, what the heck is happening here? But it's amazing. I love the detail that burgers were so cheap at this diner because he would go back in time and buy meat for the prices they were back then. The time portal always takes you to the exact same moment. He can go back to current day and he only loses a couple minutes. But if he wants to go back and try again, the portal only goes to the exact same day, place, and time. So he has to work back up to 11/22/1963. This is finally a time loop story that plays with what I think is the most fun parts of time loops. It also has an incredible, beautiful romance. I also learned a lot about JFK that I didn't really care about before. If you've watched the Hulu show, they left out all of my favorite parts, and I feel like the heart of the story. It has the main important plot points to the A-plot of trying to stop the assassination, but it cuts out some of the wonderful things along the way, especially the time loops. The time loops are my favorite part, and I feel like the time loops are an important part of the story, this is an A tier. If you went back in time and you told me that The Shining was going to get a sequel where Danny grew up and works in hospice, I would say, why? Why are we doing that? I firmly think that not everything needs a sequel. Will I see Beetlejuice? Yeah, probably, but I don't think it should have been made or needs to exist. Not everything, and actually most things, don't need sequels. But Doctor Sleep is good, and I take it all back. It sounds dumb, especially that Danny befriends a child, and it sounds kind of weird when you just say it like that, but it's not gross and it makes sense in the book. This is more about recovery than just addiction, and it really hit for me. Movie also slaps. I love Mike Flanagan. I will watch literally everything he makes, and I will probably enjoy all of it. My only complaint about Dr. Sleep the movie is that he was not working with Rahul Kohli yet, so there was a terrible lack of him in the cast. I am halfway through Just After Sunset, and have been halfway through Just After Sunset for like 6 weeks because I just can't bring myself to come back. And they're Stephen King short stories. It's just what it says on the tin. I don't like most of them. C tier, that's it. I read Mr. Mercedes right after reading The Outsider, so I spent 400 something pages waiting for a supernatural twist that never happened. So that was kind of boring. It's a former cop. He and his friends investigate a mass killing and try to stop a second event. My problem with this is that you're in the POV of the killer. Not in the "this is so annoying I can't handle it" way. There's no mystery because we already know who done it. That's why I thought there had to be a supernatural twist to this. You can't just tell us who did it and why they did it, and then not make it interesting after that. No spoilers, but especially for who did the mass killing, you're like, yeah, that's just who does that. There's nothing interesting here. I liked Holly, but I didn't like the other main characters. There was only so many cop POVs that King can get me to read. I may eventually finish the series if I get bored enough. Maybe I'll watch the show if I run out of other TV to watch. C tier. Raise your hand if you only read this next one because of the KingCast recommendations. It's Revival. Now, I do think it's a little overhyped. Everyone talks about how scary the ending is. We finally get into something interesting and scary, and then the book ends. The best part happens, and then we just stop. But also like Hereditary, I did still enjoy the journey. We follow the life of Jamie Morton from childhood to adulthood as it intertwines with the Methodist minister named Charles Jacobs. If you like the longitudinal storytelling of it, but you would like something shorter, read Revival. It is mostly normal and not supernatural until the ending. The ending is bonkers, but it just ends so abruptly that I have to take a point off from that. I think the characters are extremely interesting. I can't really talk about my favorite things in this book without spoiling the plot, but I love the themes. I think every character is very interesting, and it is not Stephen King's best, but it is deeply enjoyable, so it gets an A. The Outsider, one of the first books that I read live right when it was published. Small-town teacher's fingerprints and DNA are found at the site of a brutal murder, but he has an airtight alibi at a work function. Who could have done it? Very fun, great characters, an incredibly tight thriller. You are on the edge of your seat the entire time, trying to figure out what happened and how this could have made sense. I also love Holly. I have not read Holly yet because, like I said, I haven't read the other two Mr. Mercedes books, or if it bleeds, because if I read another Stephen King short story, I'm going to blow my brains out. But I love Holly in this. The supernatural element is really interesting and fun to me. I think it's something that King hasn't really covered a lot in other ways. A tier, would recommend. The miniseries on HBO is also very good. The Institute is exactly what it says on the tin. Kids with psychic powers are kept in an institute for research. That's it. It's kind of like Firestarter Part 2, and also written more recently, so there's not some of the Mr. King, why did you do this things. I like it. It's not earth-shattering, it's not groundbreaking, but I enjoyed reading it. Dear God, I am glad that Billy Summers was an ebook. It's a hitman, writes a memoir about his life being a hitman and the bad childhood that he had, and I DNF'd it at like 50% because I didn't care. I was reading it as my nighttime sleepy book. As I've said before, I have a terrible disease where I have to read something to fall asleep. If it's too good, I stay up reading because it's too good. And if it's too bad, I'm distracted by how bad it is and I can't sleep. and it was in that too bad category. I looked up the ending online after deciding to DNF it and was even more pleased that I did not finish it. Boring, flat characters that are bad people. It's not even interesting that he's a hitman or like the other hitman and the mafia stuff. The ending has an incredibly bad last minute twist. It was worse even than the short story twists. Fairy Tale, I wanted to like you so bad. I love the setup. This teenager helps the crotchety old man neighbor because no one else will, and after years of friendship learns that there is a portal to another dimension in that old man's back shed. It's a great setup, there's a wonderful dog, and it is the most boring story I've ever read. I think it's because I read a lot of fantasy that I know what I like and don't like. I'm being polite and saying not what is good or bad, but it was not good. This is the best example that Stephen King needed an editor. The fantasy world just felt like offcuts from some Dark Tower scenes. It just made me want to reread The Dark Tower instead of finishing this behemoth. I read this when it came out a couple years ago, and I can't even tell you how it ends. C tier. It's not terrible, and I did finish it, but it's not good. And finally, You Like It Darker. Short stories, but good this time. I genuinely, unironically think that this is some of Stephen King's strongest writing. This is another top contender for if you've been wanting to read Stephen King but you weren't sure where to start. I think these are great. Are they all good? No. The Turbulence Expert is objectively stupid. Willy the Weirdo is an okay concept that just gets dumb and weird for no reason, but the good ones are so good. As I said in a previous video, Rattlesnakes is objectively stupid as a concept, incredible in the execution. Danny Coughlin's Bad Dream is wonderful, and I am dying for a Mike Flanagan adaptation of it. The Answer Man was also very sweet in that side of Stephen King where you get a longitudinal slice of someone's life. Very, very good. A tier. That is every Stephen King book that I have read or DNF'd so far. There are many more that I have not read. I have physical copies of many of them. I'm working my way through. I will make an updated tier list when I've read a few more. If you have any you specifically want me to read, please comment down below and let me know so I can prioritize them. I really want to read The Tommyknockers, The Talisman, and I think Desperation and the Regulators because I think it's so interesting. I also have the Bachman books. I don't want to read my physical copy because it's in such great shape, so I'm waiting for a library loan to come in so I can read it. I don't know what to do for an outro, so if you could like this and follow me and comment, that would be super. You can also find me elsewhere. I'm on Instagram and TikTok under the same handle. Okay, I love you, bye!